and welcome to the Alameda County Incentive Project Requirements webinar for Cali VIP. Next slide, please, Jane. My name is Amy Slavensky, and I will be moderating today. Our speakers are Fidel Leon Green from the Center for Sustainable Energy, and Jesse Denver and Zach Thompson from East Bay Community Energy. For our Q&A session, Brian Fauble from the California Energy Commission will be joining our speakers as a panelist to answer your questions. Next slide, please. Before we get started, please note that you may submit questions for our panelists at any time during this presentation using the chat box feature. Also, because we are expecting high traffic, there is a possibility of some technical difficulties during the presentation. We apologize for any delays or compromised presentation quality. If you miss any part of the webinar or if you have additional questions, please reach out to us at Alameda County CALeVIP at energycenter.org. The presentation will also be sent to attendees by this Friday, October 22nd, and is available on the CEC docket. Next slide, please. On the agenda for today, Fidel will give some background on Cali VIP and then go into some more detail on the Alameda County Incentive Project. We will also discuss eligibility and equipment requirements for the project and then wrap up with our question and answer session. I will now pass it over to Fidel to start the presentation. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Amy. To date, Cali VIP has launched 11 projects covering more than 30 counties all over California. And for each project, the goal is to implement a targeted incentive program that encourages relevant processes to become more streamlined and transforms communities by enabling access to charging infrastructure. Next slide, please. Cali VIP is made possible by funds from the California Energy Commission's Clean Transportation Program, which was established in 2008 and in 2013 was extended through 2023 by California Assembly Bill 8. To date, nearly $200 million in funding from both the California Energy Commission and our regional partners has facilitated the installation of EV charging infrastructure both for level 2 and DC fast charging. Next slide, please. The upcoming Alameda County Incentive Project will provide incentives for both level 2 and DC fast chargers. Incentives will be available for most non-single family home uses and will be reserved on a first-come, first-served basis. Exceptions to the first-come, first-served policy will be made, if necessary, to meet minimum funding requirements for disadvantaged communities, low-income communities, and multi-unit dwelling hotspots. Applications will open on December 1st, 2021, between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., and will remain open once available. We'll continue going over the Alameda County Incentive Project in more detail, but you'll be able to find all of the relevant information and resources on the Alameda County Incentive Project landing page, which is linked on this slide and can be found on our website, CALeVIP.org. Next slide, please. Before going over more of the project details, we'd love to learn more about our live audience's prior experience with Cali VIP. So please take a few seconds to answer our first poll question of the day. How many times have you participated in a Cali VIP project? I think just a few more seconds and then we'll be closing the poll. Okay, thank you all for your participation. It looks like for most of the audience, this will be the first project. However, a good quarter has participated a couple of times, and a few of you, you could say you're veterans of the Cali VIP project. So thank you all again for your participation. Next slide, please. As the name implies, the Alameda County Incentive Project is limited to Alameda County. This means that the physical location of the installation must be located within the Alameda County boundaries to be eligible for incentives. Next slide, please. Before continuing, let's go over some key definitions for the Alameda County Incentive Project. First is the term disadvantaged community. The disadvantaged community designation is based on the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessments CALeVIP 3.0 scores, which consider a variety of socioeconomic, health, and environmental factors. To be designated as a disadvantaged community, a census tract must be in the 75th percentile or top 25% of all California census tracts. The link on the slide will take you to the CALeVIP 3.0 mapping tool, where you can view each California census tract's CALeVIP score. The next term is low-income community. To be designated as a low-income community, a census tract must have a median income equal to or below 80% of the statewide median income. The link on the slide will take you to a mapping tool displaying all of the census tracts that meet this designation. Now moving on to the first term that is new to Cali VIP, the MUD hotspot. An MUD hotspot is a square mile within Alameda County that has a higher density of multi-unit dwellings of 5 units or more than in other areas. The link on the slide will take you to a mapping tool that displays the areas within Alameda County that meet this designation. East Bay Community Energy will also go over this mapping tool in just a few minutes. The fourth term on this list is the active connector. In this incentive project, the number of active connectors is a characteristic of a DC fast charger and refers to the number of connectors that can concurrently or simultaneously supply the guaranteed max output at any one time. Finally, the guaranteed max output is also a characteristic of a DC fast charger and refers to the maximum power that can be provided per active connector when all active connectors are in use. These 5 definitions are a few of the key definitions for the Alameda County Incentive Project. For a full list of definitions, please refer to the implementation manual, which can be found on the Alameda County Incentive Project landing page. Next slide, please. The Alameda County Incentive Project is presented in partnership with East Bay Community Energy. Here to talk more about East Bay Community Energy are Jesse Denver and Zach Thompson.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, great. Thanks everyone for your interest in the Alameda County Incentive Project. I think we can go to the next slide, please. East Bay Community Energy is the default load serving entity in Alameda County. We were formed as a joint power authority by the cities in Alameda County and Alameda County itself to become the not-for-profit public power agency. We provide electricity to residential, commercial, industrial, and public sector customers throughout Alameda County. We are governed by a board of directors that's actually made up of elected officials from each of the Joint Power Authority member communities. And as a public agency, we have no shareholders, so all of our revenue is reinvested into the community and to community-based programs that help our JPA members advance their climate action goals faster. We did expand our service territory in 2019 with the cities of Newark and Pleasanton opting in. So now in Alameda County, we serve the entirety of Alameda County with the exception of the city of Alameda. The city of Alameda has its own municipal utility, and CALeVIP incentives in the city of Alameda are applicable, and those funds will come from the CEC's component of the budget for the Alameda County Incentive Project. We do serve the city of Tracy, but that is in neighboring San Joaquin County, and there is a different CALeVIP project that would be applicable to Tracy. So how it works is EBCE procures the power, PG&E then distributes this power through its wires and poles, or T&D system, and it's delivered to businesses and residents. Businesses and residents, they still get a PG&E bill, and on that bill, East Bay Community Energy is a line item for the electricity generation component of the bill. Next slide, please. In working with the CEC team in structuring the Alameda County project, we evaluated our multifamily housing stock of 5 or more units. And what we found was that 90% of the buildings with 5 or more units are 50 years old or older. That means that there's going to need to be a lot of electrical infrastructure upgrades made to be able to install electric vehicle charging in multifamily properties at scale. In Alameda County, 47% of all residents are renters. And we can see from our DMV registration data that there has been little uptake in EV adoption by renters. And so if we're to help half of the population in Alameda County transition to zero emission vehicles near term, we're going to need to deliver different solutions at the same time as we're trying to install charging infrastructure at multifamily properties. And that alternate solution is deployment of DC fast charge hubs that are conveniently located near where renters live. And what this means is identifying areas within a square mile of a multifamily hotspot, which is what we've assessed the data that we have, and then created this mapping tool to be able to identify for you. And to deploy those fast charging hubs in these hotspots at commercial properties and other properties, not necessarily at the multifamily property itself, but nearby, so that these fast charging hubs can serve as many renters as possible, because we also know that there's been little deployment of fast charging hubs in many of these hotspots, and Zach will be able to show you that now on the map. So a few key takeaways on why we developed the map. 47% of the population in Alameda County are renters, and 90% of our multifamily housing stock with 5 or more units is 50 years old or older. So we need to deploy DC fast charging hubs at scale to be able to help this population of our residents transition to zero emission vehicles near term. The other thing I'll mention is that we did work with the CEC to ensure that the adder for multifamily housing that is in DAC and low-income communities also extends to affordable multifamily properties, even if they're outside of DAC and low-income boundaries. We have a number of multifamily affordable housing properties that are out in the Tri-Valley area and down in the Fremont area. And for residents to be able to live in multifamily affordable housing, they have to meet income eligibility requirements that are the same as those affordable multifamily properties that are in DAC and low income geographic boundaries. So that's just the other thing that I wanted to note, that we analyzed data and included that in our collaboration with the CEC as we structured this project. So now I'll transition it over to Zach so that he can give you a demonstration of our multifamily hotspot map. Zach?
Okay, thanks Jesse and Zach, and apologies for some technical difficulties. But moving on to eligibility requirements for applicants, all applicants must either be the site owner or have prior authorization from the site owner to install EV charging stations. Applicants must also be part of a business, nonprofit, organization, California Native American tribe, be a public or government entity based in California, or operate as a California-based affiliate. Registration with the California Secretary of State is also required. Applicants are required to submit a signed site verification form within 5 calendar days of application submittal. However, we strongly encourage all applicants to complete this form as soon as possible so that applicants can upload it shortly after submitting their application. Failure to submit a signed site verification form within 5 days of applying will result in an auto cancellation of your application. So please, please, please get your site verification forms filled out ahead of time. Finally, to receive rebates funded by East Bay Community Energy, applicants must be a customer of East Bay Community Energy. Next slide, please. Funding for the Alameda County Incentive Project totals just over $17 million, $14.5 million from the California Energy Commission for both Level 2 and DC fast chargers, and just over $2.5 million from East Bay Community Energy for Level 2 chargers. Remember that to access funding from East Bay Community Clean Energy, you must be one of their customers and will be required to provide your service account number. Half of all funding for each technology type will be allocated to disadvantaged communities and or low-income community installations. Additionally, half of DC fast charger funding will be allocated to multi-unit dwelling hotspot applications. Next slide, please. Level 2 rebates for the Alameda County Incentive Project will be composed of 3 components: the base rebate, the disadvantaged community, low-income community, or affordable housing adder, and the multi-unit dwelling adder. The affordable housing adder is a new addition to Cali VIP and was proposed by East Bay Community Energy along with the multi-unit dwelling hotspot requirement. The base rebate will provide the lesser of $3,500 port connector and 75% of project costs. Level 2 connectors installed in a disadvantaged community or low-income community or affordable housing site will receive an additional $500. And Level 2 connectors installed in a multi-unit dwelling site defined as a 3 or more unit within a structure will receive an additional $2,000. Note that all components can be stacked for a maximum rebate of $6,000 per Level 2 connector. Next slide, please. Now turning to DC fast chargers. The rebates for DC fast chargers are divided into 2 power level tiers: the 50 to 100 kW tier, which excludes 100 kW chargers, and the 100 kilowatt and above tier. For the 50 to 100 kilowatt tier, sites not located in a disadvantaged community or low-income community can receive up to $30,000 per active connector. sites located in a disadvantaged community and or low-income community can receive up to $40,000 per active connector. For the 100 kW and above tier, sites not located in a disadvantaged community or low-income community can receive up to $60,000 per active connector, and sites located in a disadvantaged community or low-income community can receive up to $80,000 per active connector. Note that all final rebates are based on the guaranteed max output of the DC fast charger connector and are capped at 75% of the total project cost. Next slide, please. Moving on from rebate limits to equipment requirements, all equipment must be new and installed. Apologies. For those of you only looking to install DC fast chargers, you may receive a rebate for 1 to 6 active connectors. And for those of you only looking to install level 2 chargers, you may receive a rebate for 1 to 10 connectors. For combo applications, you may receive a rebate for up to 6 fast charger active connectors and up to 4 level 2 connectors. Also note that you may install beyond these limits, but you will not receive rebates beyond the limits indicated on the slide. Next slide, please. Now moving on from rebate limits to equipment requirements, all equipment must be new and installed at the site for the first time and must appear on the Alameda County eligible equipment list. And there seems to be some error on the link there, but we'll get it fixed in a new version. The eligible equipment list is updated monthly as we are made aware of new equipment that meets eligibility requirements. Also note that equipment on applications may be swapped like for like. This is especially important for DC fast chargers, as there will not be an other option for the DC fast charger category. So please review the linked Alameda County eligible equipment list and be ready to make a selection when filling out your application. To appear on the list, level 2 chargers must use the J1772 connector, and DC fast chargers must use either a CHAdeMO or a CCS connector on each dispenser. For those of you who have submitted CALeVIP applications before, note that the change from previously requiring dual standard chargers with both a CHAdeMO and a CCS connector no longer applies here. And a charger may have either or CHAdeMO CCS connector options. All chargers must be networked and be capable of remote start, remote diagnostics, and charging session data logging. Level 2 chargers must sign a networking agreement for a minimum of 2 years, and DC fast chargers must sign for a minimum of 5 years. Level 2 chargers must be capable of 6.2 kilowatts or greater, and that's per connector, while DC fast chargers must be capable of a guaranteed maximum output of 50 kilowatts or greater per active connector, with chargers capable of 100 kilowatts or greater eligible for a higher rebate. Level 2 chargers must be Energy Star certified, though this does not apply to DC fast chargers for this project. All chargers must accept at least 2 forms of payment and some form of credit card, be it on the dispenser, through an app, or a toll-free number. Please note that beginning January 1st, 2022 and January 1st, 2023, all public-facing DC fast chargers and level 2 chargers, respectively, that require payment will be required by Senate Bill 454 to have EMV credit card readers, also known as chip readers, among other requirements. DC fast chargers and level 2 chargers installed before those dates must still add credit card readers by July 1st, 2033, or when replaced. And finally, all chargers must be approved by a nationally recognized testing laboratory program. Next slide, please. So we've discussed active connectors at various points now, but how do we determine the number of active connectors a charger has? Well, take for example these two dual-port DC fast chargers. When idle, both the top and the bottom chargers can provide power through either connector. Once a vehicle comes in and plugs into the top charger, the other connector can no longer provide power. If another car drives up and wants to use this charger, then it must wait until the first car is done using the charger. This charger has one active connector because only one connector can be active at a time. On the other hand, the bottom charger can always provide power to both connectors. Even when a car is charging from one of the connectors, a second car can drive up and charge from the other. This means that the bottom charger has two active connectors because two connectors can be active at a time. Next slide, please. Now let's look at the same scenario, but assign a max power output of 100 kilowatts to each charger. The top charger with one active connector only ever supplies power to a single connector at a time, meaning that it is guaranteed to always have a max power output of 100 kilowatts. Thus, its guaranteed max output is 100 kilowatts. However, the bottom charger has two active connectors and does share power between its connectors, meaning that when all its active connectors are in use, its maximum power output is split into two, so each connector can only guarantee to always have a max power output of 50 kilowatts. Thus, its guaranteed max output is 50 kilowatts. So to recap, both chargers have a maximum power output of 100 kilowatts. The top charger has one active connector with a guaranteed max output of 100 kilowatts, while the bottom charger has two active connectors, each one with a guaranteed max output of 50 kilowatts. Next slide, please. Now switching from equipment requirements to site requirements, specifically for DC fast chargers. All DC fast charger sites must be well lit, secure, and in compliance with all federal, state, and municipal laws, ordinances, rules, codes, standards, and regulations. This requirement actually applies to all sites, including level 2 sites. All DC fast charger sites must be publicly accessible at all times, meaning that they cannot be in a gated area close to the public at any time. Additionally, the primary use of DC fast charger sites must be one that is listed on the slide. Next slide, please. In addition to the requirements from the previous slide, the DC fast charger connectors selected for incentives must meet the following requirements. There must be at least one CCS connector and one CHAdeMO connector in the group, and the number of CCS connectors in the group must equal or exceed the number of CHAdeMO connectors in the group. For example, if I install 3 CCS connectors and one CHAdeMO connector, all 4 connectors can be selected for incentives, since I have installed one of each connector and there is a greater amount of CCS connectors. Similarly, if I install 2 CCS connectors and 2 CHAdeMO connectors. All 4 connectors can be selected for incentives, since I have installed one of each connector, and there are an equal amount of CCS connectors and CHAdeMO connectors. However, if I wish to install 1 CCS connector and 3 CHAdeMO connectors, I'm free to do so, but only 1 CCS and 1 CHAdeMO connector can be selected for incentives. Otherwise, the requirement that the number of CCS connectors equal or exceed the quantity of CHAdeMO connectors will not be met. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned previously, all sites must be well lit, secure, and in compliance with all federal, state, and municipal laws, ordinances, rules, codes, standards, and regulations. Level 2 sites must be shared use, meaning, for example, that a single charger is not dedicated to a single tenant in a multi-unit dwelling or a single employee at a workplace. However, it is not a requirement that they be publicly available. Primary site uses for level 2 chargers are more expansive than for direct current fast chargers, but must fall into the categories listed on the slide. Also, please note that curbside installations are allowed for level 2 chargers as long as the installation happens on the same block as another eligible site type. Next slide, please. Okay, so it's time for our second poll question of the day. Since you've tuned into this webinar, we assume that you have an EV charging installation in mind. So please tell us how far along you are in your charger installation project. I'll give you a few seconds to answer. Just a few more seconds and we'll be closing the poll. Okay, so it seems most of you are still considering your options and you're in your pre-planning phase, while a good quarter of attendees are in the planning stage and finalizing some project contracts. And a few of you have already started some of your construction, so congratulations. Thanks again to all of you for your participation. Next slide, please. Okay, so now let's review the rebate cap limit. This rebate cap limit is on the dollar amount of active applications, which means applications that are in a funds reserved status where the applicant is working on designing the project, procuring the equipment, making the installations, and commissioning the equipment. Once an application is completed and the rebate is paid out, then the funds associated with that application is removed from the applicant's dollar amount of active applications, and the applicant is then eligible to apply for more funds. The dollar amount of active applications is tracked using the applicant's tax identification number and is capped at $992,000 for the Alameda County Incentive Project. Next slide, please. So here's an example of how the rebate cap limit works. Say ABC Company files 3 applications in Alameda County. The applications are for $496,000, $256,000, and $240,000, and add up to a total of $992,000, the rebate cap limit. ABC Company may submit additional applications, but none of the additional applications in Alameda County can have funds reserved until the dollar amount of its active applications in Alameda County drops below the rebate cap limit. This means that the company must finish the installation and receive the rebate for at least one of the projects to have additional funds reserved in Alameda County. So let's assume that ABC Company completes the requirements for the $256,000 application and receives the final rebate. This means that ABC Company's active applications in Alameda County now add up to $736,000. As a result, ABC Company can now apply for up to $256,000 in new applications in Alameda County, or can have funds reserved for any additional applications in Alameda County, adding up to $256,000. Next slide, please. So, what can the incentive funds be used for? Generally, funds can be used for any cost associated with the installation of the electric vehicle chargers, be it the electric vehicle supply equipment, the make-ready infrastructure, the labor and material installation costs, energy storage, or any of the other items listed on this slide. An important thing to note is that all of these eligible costs can be incurred on or after October 1st, 2021. These costs are incurred at the applicant's own risk before the associated application's funds are reserved. However, once funds are reserved, all incurred eligible costs can be covered with the final rebate, as long as the application meets all other requirements. Next slide, please. In contrast, these are the ineligible costs. Permit and inspection fees are by law ineligible to be rebated by Cali VIP. Any installation, materials, equipment, and other costs that are not related to the electric vehicle charger installation are not eligible to receive a rebate. Additionally, costs paid by other rebate or incentive program or projects are not eligible to receive a rebate. And finally, standalone solar panel costs are not eligible to receive a rebate because they are funded through other California Energy Commission programs. Next slide, please. Okay, so now let's talk about a couple of key documents for keeping your applications moving and on time. First up is the site verification form. The site verification form can be downloaded from the Alameda County Incentive Project landing page, as well as directly from the link embedded on the slides. This form must be submitted within 5 calendar days of submitting your application. Otherwise, your application will be canceled. As I stated earlier, it is highly encouraged to fill out this form as soon as you know you will be submitting an application, ideally well before beginning your application, so that it can be submitted at the same time as your application. Also, please remember that the information on the site verification form must match the information on the application. Next slide, please. The second key set of documents we'll talk about is the evidence of permit or utility submittal. This set of documents is due 60 calendar days after the date of your funds or after the date your funds are reserved. To satisfy this requirement, applicants can submit either evidence of permit application submittal or evidence of utility service design submittal. For applicants going the permit route, this means submitting a copy of the permit application, a copy of the permit plan set, meaning the full set of plans required to support the permit application, and a copy of the payment receipt for permit application submittal, indicating that it has been accepted. For applicants going the utility service design route, this means submitting a copy of the utility service design application, the full plan set submitted with the utility service design application and a copy of the payment received for the application submittal. Next slide, please. Next is the job site installation form, which can be downloaded from the Alameda County Incentive Project landing page, as well as directly from the link embedded on the slides. The job site installation form must be submitted prior to receiving a milestone payment and/or a final payment, as it is an attestation that the project's EVITP requirements have been met. Next slide, please. Finally, I'll go over the signed application form. The signed application form is another form that is required before receiving any payment. It is here on the signed application form that applicants will need to indicate how many CCS connectors and how many CHAdeMO connectors they plan to install. Additionally, applicants will once again attest that their installations will meet the DC fast charger connector site requirements. Applicants only installing level 2 chargers will still have to submit a signed application prior to receiving any payment. Next slide, please. So we will now go through the rebate process for DC fast chargers and combination applications. The first step is to apply online, which we will go through in more detail during the November 16th pre-launch webinar, and then submit your site verification form within 5 days of applying to avoid cancellation. After submittal of your site verification form, the Center for Sustainable Energy will review your application to confirm that all of the eligibility requirements are being met. This includes applicant eligibility, site eligibility, and equipment eligibility. Once review is complete and an application meets all eligibility requirements, the Center for Sustainable Energy will move the application to the funds reserved stage, after which applicants will have 15 months to complete installation. Applicants should receive notifications of this date through the applicant dashboard and email. However, applicants only have 60 days after their funds reserved date to submit their evidence of permit submittal or utility design submittal, which we went over in the previous slide. Next slide, please. In step 5, applicants must upload all remaining documents. Note that the system requires you to upload documents before submission, meaning that these are two separate actions. This is designed to help applicants prepare their full submission before submitting. However, this does require applicants to press Submit after all documents have been uploaded. So please don't forget to press the Submit button. Step 6 is an optional step only available to DC fast chargers and combination applications. This step allows applicants to request a milestone payment of up to 60% of the reserved rebate amount, up to 8 months after the fund's reserved date. The milestone payment is intended to provide the applicant with a portion of the actual design project costs during build-out. Finally, once the Center for Sustainable Energy has reviewed the documents from your final submission, applicants may receive the final payment. Next slide, please. And now we will look at the level 2 only rebate process. It is very similar to the one we just went over, with a few notable exceptions. Step 1 is the same: apply online, and within 5 days, provide the site verification form to avoid auto cancellation. Step 2 is also the same: CSE performs the initial verification to confirm that all eligibility requirements are being met. After initial verification, the application moves to the funds reserved stage. And here is one of the changes from the DC fast charger and combination applications. For level 2 applications, you have 9 months to complete installation. 60 days from the funds reserved to date, applicants must submit evidence of permit submittal or utility design submittal, which remains the same as DC fast charger application or combo applications. Step 5 again remains the same, upload and submit the final documentation. Please remember to press submit once all documents have been uploaded. For step 6, note that there is not an option to receive a milestone payment. This is another notable difference from DC fast charger and combination applications. Instead, the application goes straight to final payment once the Center for Sustainable Energy has reviewed the documents from the final submission. Next slide, please. Okay, so a few key takeaways from today's webinar. Applications will open in approximately 6 weeks to eligible properties in Alameda County. All applicants should complete their site verification form before applying so that it's ready to submit well in advance of the 5-day deadline. Please make sure that the applicant organization name and installation address are entered into the application and site verification form accurately, as they must match and cannot be updated after submission. The use of electric vehicle infrastructure training program certified electricians, consistent with Public Utilities Code Section 740.20, will be required for all Alameda County Incentive Project applications. So please keep that in mind as you are planning your projects. A pre-launch webinar will be held in approximately 4 weeks with more information on the application process. And a bonus key takeaway, please review the Alameda County eligible equipment list well before launch day. This is located on the Alameda County Incentive Project landing page. If you are planning on installing DC fast chargers, please have a plan for what chargers you want to select in your application, as there will not be an other or undecided option for DC fast chargers. Next slide, please. After this webinar, we encourage you to stay connected with Cali VIP. Linked here is the California Energy Commission docket for Cali VIP, 17 EVI 01. On that docket, you can submit comments anytime, view all submitted documents, download past presentations, and this presentation as well. You can also sign up for the Cali VIP email listserv by going to calivip.org, scrolling to the bottom, and filling in your information in the Stay Up to Date section. With that, I'll turn it back to Amy, who will moderate the Q&A session this morning. Amy?
Thank you, Fidel. Next slide, please, Jane. First, I'd like to see if we could potentially give a demo of the MUD hotspot interactive map again. Jane, would you mind pulling that up and Zach can run through it?
Yeah, great. There we go. All right. Thanks everyone for your patience with this. So yeah, basically here is the map. And again, as was mentioned earlier, there's a link to this map on the program webpage, so you all can access it there. And then Jane, if you, in the top left there where it says ACIP MUD hotspot map, if you could click on that down arrow below that. Yeah, so that just shows the description of the map here, including the requirement of 50% of all DC fast charging incentives being reserved for projects located within these hotspots. And so the red boundary here is just the boundary of Alameda County. So that, of course, is the project boundary line. And then the blue shaded areas are the multi-unit dwelling, or MUD hotspots that we were talking about. And these are, again, as Jesse was mentioning earlier, these are determined based on data of multi-unit dwellings. So that's residential buildings that are 5 units or more, that we mapped out and that are located throughout these areas. And so each of these squares is a square mile that is, it reaches a certain MUD unit threshold. So it's not necessarily based on the number of buildings in each square mile, but the number of total units within each square mile. So that's how we determined the hotspots themselves. And so with this map, as Jane was just showing, you can zoom in and out. You basically use this just like you would with Google Maps. You can move around, you can zoom in and out. And then in the bottom left there, you can toggle from this base view to the actual satellite view. So that would allow you to zoom in and see individual properties specifically that you may be thinking of applying for. And then back up at the top where the title of the map is, there's that little search icon. And you can click there and then type in any address that you want. So if you have a specific property in mind already, you could just type the address in there. And just like it would on Google Maps, as soon as you hit enter, it'll take you right to that property and will show you whether or not that is within an MUD hotspot. And the last thing that I'll mention is on the current view right now that we're in, you can see that some of these lines they look a little squiggly right now. And so basically what we tried to do there was make it so that each parcel that was originally sort of dissected by a line, we just tried to wrap the boundary lines around those parcels to fully include them within the hotspots to avoid confusion there. So I think that is pretty much it for displaying the map. Again, this is on the program webpage, the link to that, so you can all easily access it there. But I think that's it for now.
Great, thank you, Zach. All right, I see that we have a few questions in the question box. I would encourage you to keep putting your questions in there as we only have a few right now, but I will go ahead and start reading through these. So the first question is for Brian. Does there need to be public bathrooms, or in general, is it just public access?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. The sites do not have to have any specific amenities for it. We don't call out the exact amenities. We state that the sites must be safe and well lit and comply with all local codes and laws. On the public access part, I also just want to clarify that the chargers have to be publicly accessible if they're level 2 or fast chargers. If they're the fast chargers, they have to be publicly accessible 24/7. If they're level 2, they can be private. But the access is for the charger, not for the site or the business associated with the site. And so you can still install a charger at a mall or a business that is not going to be open 24/7, as long as that charger, the public has access to that charger.
Thank you, Brian. All right, Fidel, what is the approval process for registering new equipment for use in this project?
Sorry, was having issues unmuting myself here. Yeah, so the process begins by heading over to CaliVIP.org and creating an account under the equipment manufacturer category. Once you have completed your creation of your account, then someone from Cali VIP will reach out to confirm your intent to create that account and to submit equipment. And from then on, you will be able to add equipment and submit it for equipment eligibility verification.
Thank you, Fidel. Another one for you, Fidel. I'm going to kind of combine these two. How long does it take for the site verification form to be reviewed and approved? And how much time should we expect between time of application and time of funds reserved?
Yeah, so typically the site verification form is part of the initial verification process. And that initial verification is the step that takes you from applied over to funds reserved. And we typically try to process all of the applications from launch day within 60 days of launch. So I would say that's the typical timeline you could expect to see your funds reserved status.
Thank you, Fidel. All right, for Zach, is the Port of Oakland included in the airport eligible?
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering if someone could clarify the question about whether or not they mean if this is related to the MUD hotspot map. But regardless, yes, the Port of Oakland and the airport are eligible for Cali VIP funds. They would just be eligible for the CEC's portion of the funds rather than EBCE's portion of the funds, because the Port of Oakland and the airport are not actually EBCE electricity customers for the most part. But you know, the EBCE dollars are only going to level 2 funds anyways. So they would be eligible for CEC funds, which cover both technologies.
Thank you, Zach. All right, Fidel, if a charger has 2 active connectors with a total of 100 kilowatts, would the funding be $80,000 total or $160,000 total for both connectors?
Yeah, sorry, I keep losing my mute button. So yes, if a charger has 2 active connectors and each active connector has guaranteed max output of 100 kW, then the funding total could be 160,000 for both connectors, assuming they're in a disadvantaged community. However, if the charger is 100 kW but has 2 active connectors and each connector can only provide a guaranteed max output of 50 kW, then it is considered to be in the lower tier. So it would only be eligible for 2 rebates of the lower rebate amount.
Thank you, Fidel. Brian, can you go over the card reader requirements for chargers again?
Yeah, so I'll just note that this is a law passed by ARB for payment accessibilities. So it comes from SB 454 payment guidelines, requiring that all public chargers that charge a fee must have a credit card EMV, that's the chip reader, as one of the payment methods. It can either be installed on each physical charger, or you can have a kiosk that services all the chargers. So that is law from ARB. And the timelines again are referenced in the presentation that for fast chargers, it's January 1st, 2022, and for level 2s, it's January 1st, 2023. So pretty much any fast charger in this project, if it's going to be, well, pretty soon they're all going to be public, so they all are going to have to comply with that in one way or the other. The level 2s, if you can get them installed before 2023, you would not have to comply.
Great, thanks. Fidel, how long will the program be open after December 1st, or is it until funds run out?
Yes, so that's correct. It's available until funds run out. We usually see pretty high demand for our programs, so funds do get fully reserved very quickly, usually within minutes now. So this is why I encourage you to have your equipment selected and your site verification form filled out so that you can get your application through as quickly as possible and receive some of the funds.
Thanks, Fidel. Brian, is there a reason for having 2 connectors when only one works? I imagine this may be confusing for the user, and I believe that's referring to the DC fast chargers.
Correct. Yes, so there's a reason. Most chargers today will have 2 connectors because there's 2 connector types. Different vehicles use different connectors for fast chargers at this time. There is a SAE CCS connector that is for most European and American battery electric vehicles. And then there's a CHAdeMO connector that is for Japanese and Korean vehicles. And so in the past, most chargers have both, so that no matter what vehicle pulls up can use that charger with their designated connector. But there are some chargers that may have 2 of the same connector, usually the CCS, as that is what most vehicles use nowadays. While we don't have a requirement anymore that every charger has to have 2 connectors, we do have our connector requirement at the site level now. So a charger can have a single connector if it's going to use that, and as long as it meets our site connector requirements.
Thanks, Brian. Fidel, can affordable housing communities get an extension on the implementation time of 9 months?
Yes, so we have our extension policy listed on the landing page. So typically if you're running into some issues with an authority having jurisdiction and facing some delays, there's usually a process to request an extension and demonstrate the progress that you have made in your installation to be granted that extension. So there's definitely an avenue for extensions when necessary.
Thank you. Brian, is there an ADA requirement for chargers?
Yes, so that's one of the categories for following all state, federal, local laws. So there is a requirement for ADA accessibility. I'm not sure if it's referenced in our implementation manual or not, but if you Google California EV ADA accessibility guidelines, it was established by the California State Architect and will detail basically the angle or the slope of the parking lot, the size of the parking or charging spaces you must use, and etc. But yes, there is ADA requirements as well as California CDFA DMS requirements that are the Division of Weight and Measures. And so that's for chargers that are going to be selling electricity, must be DMS certified as well. And that's for level 2s actually at this time. I believe fast chargers, I'll just have to verify that, but refer to the California CDFA DMS weight and measures requirements for those. And those are, I believe, identified on our eligible equipment list that gets regularly updated. The level 2 chargers are noted which ones are currently certified.
Thank you. Fidel, would a project be eligible if it is to upgrade an existing charging location with new hardware?
Yes, so as long as the chargers you're installing are new and you're adding new connectors to the site, then yes, the project would be eligible for funding.
Thanks, Fidel. Brian, regarding the cap per TIN, what would happen if I submit 10 applications requesting 1.5 million in funding total? What happens to those applications after the TIN limit is reached? Are they held and reserved, or are the applications in excess of the TIN cap denied?
So they essentially go onto a wait list. Your applications leading up to the TIN cap amount will be approved if they meet all the requirements. And then as soon as you have an application, say your last application is pushing you to $1 million when the cap is 992, CSC will work with you to see if you'd like to reduce that last application to get the full amount you can. But any applications that are in excess of the TIN cap will basically go into a holding pattern. They won't be denied, but what the active TIN cap means is you go complete your first application and say that was for $100,000. Once that project is complete, your active TIN cap now decreases $100,000, and we can come back to your application if funding is still available at that time to say, all right, you're next in line for approval. Do you still wish to move forward with this application? And we could potentially fund it. But again, for fast chargers, that's not likely to happen as we will be oversubscribed on launch day. But level 2 funding, sometimes they do go slower in other projects, but I also anticipate that this being the Bay Area and high demand might be more difficult. So yeah.
Thank you, Brian. Fidel, the information page states to be eligible for East Bay Community Energy Funding, you must be an EBCE customer with an installation site in Alameda County, excluding the city of Alameda. Can you provide clarification on the exclusion of the city of Alameda? Is the city excluded from funding as a whole or only from EBCE funds?
Yeah, that's a great question and an important one to clarify. The entirety of Alameda County, including the city of Alameda, is eligible for funds that originate from the California Energy Commission. It's only for the East Bay Community Energy Funding that the city of Alameda is excluded because its customers are not EBCE customers.
Thank you, Fidel. Brian, are there any details available on what the secure requirement for a site entails?
So I can interpret secure 2 ways. Secure as you've secured a site host agreement, or it's safe and secure. So secure, pretty much the first one, secure site agreement would be the site verification form being signed and executed and submitted within those 5 days. If it's safe and secure for that site, then the intent here, we don't define secure, but the intent is that picture what we always say in the commission is picture a mom in a minivan with her kids coming in and charging the car at 10 o'clock at night. Would you be, feel safe? Would you have them feel safe while they're charging? Well lit. We also want to make sure that the chargers, are going to be maintained or, not at a high risk of vandalism. So it's not defined, but I think it's, real judgment that, hey, this needs to be a site that you would be happy charging with your family at any time, but as well, the chargers are going to be, operating over time.
Thank you, Brian. All right, a couple of questions on eligibility and equipment requirements. Fidel, are there any restrictions on open to the public chargers of any type near a school or licensed child care center?
No. So level 2 chargers are generally open to any use that is not single family home, as long as the chargers are shared use. So in this case, that would meet that requirement. And DC fast chargers just must be open to the public at all times, 24/7. So if these chargers are open to the public, then the main determination here would be the location of the DC fast charger and ensuring that the site that the DC fast charger is installed on is one of the eligible site types.
Thanks. And another similar question, Fidel. Can chargers be located in parking spaces designated for site staff only?
So for DC fast chargers, the question is a no. But for level 2 chargers, that would be allowed as long as, again, the chargers are for a shared use, not designated for specific staff and instead available to the general staff.
Thank you. Brian, are we eligible if we install only CCS chargers at a site with existing CHAdeMO already installed?
The application must select a charger or multiple chargers that meet the minimum requirements. And so having a charger already installed is not considered in this, in the projects. And so we are only able to account and incentivize chargers that meet all of our requirements. So you would have to apply for at least one CHAdeMO connector being installed, as well as the CCS.
Thank you. All right, a question for Zach. If the boundary should cross through a property parcel, is the property included? And I believe that's referring to the MUD hotspot map.
Yeah. And as I mentioned when we were displaying the map, we tried to include full parcels on the boundary lines, but it's easier said than done. So I'm sure that there are some that are still sort of dissected by a boundary line. If that is the case, then yes, that property is still considered to be within an MUD hotspot.
Thank you. And one more for you, Zach. Regarding an applicant being a customer of EBCE, can you be an applicant if you are a trade pro and do not have a customer account and you are working with MUDs to provide, install, and manage the equipment?
Yeah, similar to what Fidel was saying earlier, when answering a similar question, all properties in Alameda County are eligible for Cali VIP funding. When you apply, you include your site host's utility account number on your application, and that will determine that'll let us know whether or not they're an EBCE customer. And so if you are an EBCE customer, you're eligible for our funds. If not, then you're eligible for the CEC's funds. But either way, any property in Alameda County is eligible for funding.
If I can add on to that, Amy, the applicant, there's multiple ways to do this. An applicant, again, is the person being cut the check for the rebate. And if I own a business and I am applying myself, I am the applicant, but I'm also the organization submitting the application. In this last question, if you're maybe a trade pro working with another business, you can still submit an application and manage an application for that site host who may or may not be that EBCE customer. And so you can still apply for sites that you don't own. You just have to have that site verification form to have their consent and kind of approval to do that process. But they still may be an EBCE partner, or not partner, client, and you would get their information to enter it, even though you as a installer or third party may not be a customer.
Thank you. Fidel, someone asked about an upgrade. To clarify, will replacing from a level 2 to DCFC be an eligible project?
That's a good question that I'm going to pass off to Brian.
Yeah, I'm trying to look if we have details in the implementation manual about what upgrades are eligible. Typically in the past, we've said if you are replacing a level 2 charger for etc., meeting the requirements would be spelled out. So if it's a paddle charger, or if it's a non-networked, or one that's just really broken and not working, those would be eligible. For the fast charger upgrades, if you're ripping out a fast charger, it would need to be under a certain kilowatt, or the non-network, etc. But going from a level 2 to a fast charger, I think would fall into that category of, well, what level 2 are you ripping out? Is it still a good working condition level 2 that meets kind of our current minimum requirements? I'm not going to give I would say reach out to CSE for the full detail. But my quick thought is, if there's a charger that meets our minimum requirements, we're not looking to rip it out, even if it is for a fast charger. If anything, we'd encourage you to install it along the same site and utilize it. The California state goal is for 250,000 chargers, and if we're ripping out chargers that still work and are chargers that we're happy with, we're not going to meet our goal if we keep ripping out chargers. So I'd recommend reaching out to CSE staff to get more clarification.
Thank you, Brian. Fidel, could you go over what the next webinar will include? Is it an EVITP webinar?
So it's not an EVITP specific webinar. The next webinar will feature some of the same details we've discussed today, but we'll go further into what the application process looks like, and additional tips for completing your application and keeping it on time. With that being said, we will go over EVITP requirements a little more in depth in the next webinar. And should you have any questions before then, you can find details on our EVITP requirements on our Alameda County implementation manual located on the landing page. And there are also other resources on that landing page, like the eligible equipment list for Alameda County and other downloadable forms. So please visit the landing page in the meantime, as it has a lot of useful information.
Thank you, Fidel. And how do we register for the next webinar?
This is Brian. I'll just state that CSE will, once we have that date finalized, CSE usually sends out an email notice a couple of weeks. At the Energy Commission, we create an event on our docket that will have the link to sign up for it. So if you're not on the email list, you can always bookmark the docket on the CEC's website and see what events are upcoming. But the easiest way is go sign up for that listserv with Cali VIP.
Thanks, Brian. All right, I think that covers most of the questions. If anyone has a last minute question, feel free to include it. I do also want to point out that Alameda Municipal Utility has a separate incentive program for level 2 chargers. If you are interested in that, you can visit their website as well. And I would like to thank everyone for your time today. If there are no further questions, then we will end the webinar. But please come back for the November 16th webinar, where we will go over the application process and talk a little bit about what to expect on launch day, what you should have prepared, and more information like that. So thank you everyone very much. There's a link to the landing page, to our email, to our website. Feel free to reach out with any further questions. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.